And good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We are currently involved in a study of the Olivet Discourse. Now look, I'm taking the time that I am to develop the proper approach, the proper context for understanding the Olivet Discourse. 9 out of 10 commentators approach this discourse with the understanding, with the belief, with the presupposition that the disciples, in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3, were asking Jesus not only about the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, but about his coming at the so-called end of the current age, the end of the Christian age. If we do not understand those questions, if we don't understand the mindset, the prophetic understanding and background of the apostles when they heard that prediction, then we will, as 99% of commentators do, make false assumptions about what they did or did not understand, about what they were or were not thinking. And so I'm sharing with you the Old Testament background of the concept of the coming of the Lord, the day of the Lord. What would the disciples think about when they asked about the coming of the Lord, the Parousia of Christ, in regard to the fall of Jerusalem? And I've shared with you from the Old Testament that the disciples well understood that the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC was the day of the Lord. It was the destruction of, quote, heaven and earth, but it was not a literal, visible, bodily coming of God out of heaven, and it most assuredly was not the end of time. But that's the prophetic background knowledge that the apostles had. Now, I shared with you yesterday of how this concept of the coming of the Lord on the clouds of heaven is the background for their understanding. In Isaiah chapter 19, the Lord foretold, "The Lord shall ride on a swift cloud and come into Egypt." That was a prediction of the fall of Egypt at the hands of the Assyrians, Isaiah chapter 20, which was accomplished. The disciples knew Yahweh had not come out of heaven literally, visibly, and bodily. Everyone knew that. The visible land of Egypt was not burnt up. The river Nile did not literally dry up. It's hyperbolic, exaggerated language. Now, let's go back a couple of chapters in Isaiah. Should have started here, but that's okay. In Isaiah chapter 13. Now, the remarkable thing about this is that this prophecy was written somewhere around 701 BC. Okay? It was written before Babylon was ever the incredible world power. That's what makes this prophecy even more astounding. Now, they were a power. They were a major player. But they were not what she would later become. All right? Now, Isaiah chapter 13, 1 and following. "The burden against Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw, lift up a banner on the high mountain. Raise your voice to them. Wave your hand that they may enter the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for my anger, those who rejoice in my exaltation. The noise of the multitude on the mountains, like that of many people. A tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts musters the army for battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven. The Lord and his weapons of indignation to destroy the whole land." Boy, this language is graphic. It is as if you could look out and see this incredibly vast multitude of an army gathered against Babylon. Now look, if you were to know Babylon in her heyday, you would have said, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The walls of Babylon were 100 feet thick. They were so wide you could drive chariots side by side on the top. She was considered absolutely invulnerable at her height. Now watch. So here is this vision of the armies gathered on the mountains surrounding Babylon. And the Lord says through Isaiah, "Wail, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It will come as destruction," watch, "from the Almighty. Therefore all hands will be limp, every man's heart will melt. They will be afraid. Pangs and sorrows will take hold of them. They will be in pain as a woman in childbirth." Now you see this motif of childbirth correlates extremely well to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 8, that the wars, the rumors of wars, the famine, the earthquake, etc., were the birth pangs of the coming destruction. Can't dwell on that right now. "They will be amazed at one another. Their faces will be like flames. Behold, the Lord comes, cruel with both wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate." Oh, wait a minute. He's already said it's the armies that's going to desolate the land. But now it's the Lord coming. "He will destroy its sinners from it." Now watch this. "For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth. The moon will not cause its light to shine. I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will halt the arrogance of the proud, will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible." Now, a couple of things here. Here's the destruction of, quote, heaven and earth, of the creation. The sun being dark and the moon being turned to darkness. Let me see. Jesus said he was going to come on the clouds of heaven. The sun would be darkened, the moon be turned to blood. At his parousia. This is at the prosopon, at the presence of the Lord. Isaiah 13, "Behold, the day of the Lord is at hand." You know what's interesting about this? People who want to deny the truthfulness, the objectivity of the time statements of the Bible, they say, "Oh, look, down here, verse 17 and following, I'm going to stir up the Medes." Well, he did later. But even as the Bible Knowledge Commentary, a dispensational commentary, takes note, within 15 years, the Assyrians destroyed Babylon. Now, the ultimate destruction was way on. But there was an at-hand, truly imminent day of the Lord that came against Babylon at the hands of the Assyrians. Historians know this. It's just those people who want to deny the inspired Bible statements of the language of time that try to find a way out of it. But do you see the point? Here are the disciples in Matthew chapter 24, hearing Jesus predict the destruction of the very center of their world. Not only the capital of their nation, but the very heartbeat of their religion. They knew it would be Jesus' parousia in the glory of the Father. They knew that Babylon had been destroyed, by the Assyrians. They knew that the literal sun, the literal moon, the literal stars didn't fall from the sky. How could they believe it had literally happened? You see, they knew that the fall of a nation, the destruction of a kingdom, was the end of, quote, their world, unquote. That's their background knowledge when Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem. There's more, okay? In tomorrow's video, I'm only going to focus on one more example of this language of the coming of the Lord, the day of the Lord, destruction of heaven and earth, coming in flaming fire, that simply could not be taken literally, visibly, and bodily of material creation or an appearance of Jesus or Yahweh. Look, folks, if we ignore this Old Testament body of knowledge and say, well, the disciples couldn't have been thinking about that. Oh, really? Why not? Or if we even say that's not what the disciples would have thought. Really? Why not? That was their database. And thus, when Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem and the disciples linked that with his parousia, they knew very well that the parousia of the Lord, the presence of the Lord, was the same as the presence of the Lord in the Old Testament, and that was the judgment of that city and nation at the hands, just as Isaiah said, the Lord was going to come and desolate the land, but it was the armies gathered together on the mountains that was going to desolate Babylon. And the reason that can be said is because the Assyrians were God's instrument. They were his sword. I may have to take the time to look at Ezekiel 29 and 30. Okay. You've just got to see this background knowledge that the disciples had in their mind. In the meantime, let me encourage you to go to my website, order the book, Like Father, Like Son on Clouds of Glory, in which I develop all of this a whole lot more extensively than I'm taking the time to here. You'll be absolutely amazed how clear the Old Testament is in defining the day of the Lord, in providing the database for the apostles' understanding of the Lord's parousia. So go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, order this book, and be sure to send me a note saying you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. In the meantime, I will see you tomorrow. And here's your homework. Okay, here's your homework assignment. Read Isaiah 34. Okay? I'll see you on the flip side.